Hi, everybody. This is Carolyn,
Hi, it's Rich.
and we're from Moore's Wines, and we are here for a special Saturday tasting. Every Saturday we do wines, but not this one.
It's only
Father's.
Friday. It's only Friday.
It's going to be
But this will,
Saturday.
yeah,
by the
you're
time
going
you
to see this on Saturday.
I put it up. Believe me, it won't be till Saturday.
I shouldn't have said
But
anything.
anyway, this is Father's Day weekend, so in honor of all those great dads
I'll
out
just
there, we are going to be tasting whiskey. We have bourbon.
Mostly whiskey.
Mostly whiskey.
I like to think of it as the small batch spirits tasting.
Small, very rare.
And very rare stuff, yeah.
Okay, Richard.
So yeah, we of course, wine is a great gift for Dad. A lot of dads though love the brown spirits, especially whiskeys. We did throw in one rum. What we all have in common here, these are special, not every day. You know, definitely celebratory spirits. We threw in one rum, so it's basically a whiskey tasting, but we threw in an aged rum to introduce people to something a little bit new.
Can we get started with the rum?
Started with the rum, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing we're doing, so we'll tell you a little about each of these. Any of these would be great Father's Day gifts. We're featuring them in the store, but you know we've got an extensive collection, and the people at the store can help you find just the right Scotch, just the right bourbon, just the right rye.
We have some stuff in the cellar. Impresses many people.
Yeah, we have stuff in the cellar that's definitely worth looking into. But we're going to start with something. Whiskey is really it, but we're going to introduce a 15-year-old Haitian rum from Barbancourt. They use the French spelling RHUM for rum. A little bit different from your typical rum. This is an aged rum. You drink it like a spirit. You drink it like a whiskey. And I'll tell you a little about the way it's made. Rum, of course, is derived from sugar cane. Generally, it's distilled from fermented molasses. They process the sugar cane into molasses, which is when they cook it down and make it real brown and molassesy tasting. In the French islands in the Caribbean, every area of the Caribbean has their own style of rum, but the French try for more of something like a cognac. So instead of fermenting molasses, they ferment it directly from the sugar cane, which gives you still know you're tasting something that's from cane, but it's not quite as burnt sugar, brown sugar tasting. And then they also tend to age it in some of it they age in larger neutral oak, larger wooden vats, and French Limousin oak, rather than like used bourbon casks, like which is more common. So you're going to get more spiciness. You're going to get a little less sweetness, and you're going to get something a little lighter and brighter and more like drinking a cognac. And then, of course, they age them for 15 years. Barbancourt, I would say, falls under the small batch spirits category. All of these are done in very small batches. Small batch usually applies to bourbons. That's kind of a category that started in the 80s. But this is made in small quantities, originally just for good customers and for the family that started Barbancourt. That would be the founder, Dupré Barbancourt, back in the 1860s. Company's been passed down through generations. Let's see what we got in the glass.
Okay, you know what? I want to tell you right off the bat. We were tasting these right before this a little bit, and I couldn't get anything off the nose. And Rich put a little bit of water in here, and like other whiskeys, the minute he did, I was able to get the nose. Because it's happening again. I'm getting nothing at all from the nose from this.
Yeah, a couple of tips about, we're definitely wine people, but there's definitely a couple things to tasting spirits. These Glencairn glasses, which we sell at the store, are perfect for tasting, nosing, just about any spirits that you drink neat. They have the shape that goes in and captures the aromas, and aromas just as important with spirits as it is with wine. It's a smaller volume because you're drinking a smaller volume. You start with looking at the color. Now, with spirits, especially with brown goods, with whiskeys and rums, the color tells you a lot. Maybe even more than with wine, because it just varies a lot. What we're looking at here is like almost like a maple syrup aged bronze color. You know, it's you'll see the difference between the different spirits we're pouring.
And then when you smell it, like with wine, you just smell it with your nose. With fish, you will also smell with your mouth at the same time, so you sort of take the whole thing in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to be careful about getting your nose way in there because
you won't get it out.
And there is a big, there's a little bit more of an alcohol burn because everything is at 40% alcohol by volume and up.
Yeah.
Up to 60% in one of these cases.
Okay, right away there's a whole lot of cinnamon in it, butterscotch, some baking spices on the nose, which are really good.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely know you're drinking a sugarcane product. You get some burnt sugar nose to it, but I get like a warm treacle syrup taste. That for some reason, most of these give off some clove to me. This definitely has cinnamon and clove, some baking spices, some woodsy notes. And in tasting spirits, a lot of the tasters will write notes based on the straight spirit by itself.
Yeah.
Then they'll add like a drop, of some filtered water. And it cuts the alcohol a little bit, especially if you got something cast strength. And it kind of, it really changes the profile.
It opens the
and other elements come through, especially in the nose.
Yeah. It brings a lot of the flavors out to the fore that are buried in there. It's kind of neat.
That's really nice. Again, like with a good wine, you're looking for a good nose. You want to hit the right flavor profile for the spirit it's supposed to be. And that long, long finish. You can drink this neat, just like that, with an ice cube. There's this wonderful stuff from Barbados.
This is great. I'm interrupting you.
Velvet Falerna, which is used in tiki drinks. It's got a lot of baking spice taste to it. You take a little aged rum, just about any aged rum, 2 ounces of that, an ice cube, a splash of this, like maybe a quarter or a half ounce, and maybe a slice of lime, and it's a delicious rocks drink. So this is for drinking spirits neat. Obviously, you can use a bigger glass for drinking something on the rocks.
I have an interruption of note.
Please.
A tasting note. Hey, okay, I noticed in tasting this that all of those flavors we were talking about on the nose, the cinnamon, the clove, the baking spices, and everything, when I tasted it, when it was like the same flavors that I got on the nose, but way the heck deeper. All of that sugar that I was feeling in the nose was sort of gone, and it was just depth. It was heaty. It was really kind of cool.
So this is the Bourbon Court. We have a nice section of aged rums, and this has got a little bit of a following. We hope they'll give it a try. We have a good amount on hand for the weekend. So remember, Father's Day is Sunday, so you got Saturday if you haven't found anything yet.
And it can always go on for the rest of June too, like a birthday.
Okay.
Okay.
Another great category. We're going to leave the most popular categories for last, the bourbon and scotch, but Irish whiskey.
Woohoo!
We love Irish whiskey. We started doing Irish whiskey tastings for St. Patrick's Day, and I really grew to love it. The only problem is they're really easy to drink.
They're so easy to drink.
Yeah, like the scotch could have some peat, and it has the proof, and it kind of slows you down, but Irish whiskey is just super easy to drink.
And in the world of Irish whiskeys, Middleton is about the best you can possibly get.
This is really special.
This is incredibly special. They have a different vintage every single year. It was originally made by
bottle.
Barry Crockett. Yeah, it's from 2017. That's how much I really drink.
Current one is the 2019
Yes,
edition.
and I've been told I have to finish this so I can get a bottle of the 2019.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work on that, people. Going to work on it. So yeah, the original master distiller was Barry Crockett. He is one of the few distillers that actually has his name on a bottle of whiskey. It's been taken over by Brian Nation. They have very, very old barley, between 16 and 25 years old. They also have both malted and unmalted barley. They have, I think, one of the only pot stills, is it? Or
oldest pot stills?
Oldest. It's oldest, but I think it's one. I don't think there's a whole slew of them. But I could be wrong on that, because I haven't been to Ireland to taste them at the distilleries, so I don't know. But I'm going to get there.
Okay. This would definitely qualify as what you call a small batch, a small batch spirit. They're making fewer than 100 they're choosing fewer than 100 barrels from about 1 million barrels that they have aging. Some of the spirits in it are up to 25 years old. So the master distiller selects and blends special barrels for this. Um, Generally, Irish whiskeys tend to be 80 proof. They go up a bit. You get some cask strength ones too. They're not peated. They're malt whiskeys, just like Scotch, but they're general, with rare exception. I only know of one that's peated. They're not peated, and they're triple distilled, so they're very smooth right off the bat, and they age very well, and they're just real warm, friendly whiskeys to enjoy. Warm and friendly, just like the Irish people.
I have a little factoid that might not even be true.
Okay.
Okay, I have read that the very first blended whiskeys came out of Ireland before Scotland even had an idea about doing it. Yep. But I only saw it one place, so I don't know if it's really true. Did you ever hear that?
I know that the Scottish learned distilling from the Irish monks. They came over and they brought distilling to Scotland.
And we don't even want to go into everything that England learned from Ireland. We don't even want to start to go into it.
Remember, no politics.
No
politics. Okay.
I love everyone.
So if you recall, color tells you a lot, especially with spirits. There's the rum, almost like a maple syrup color. I'd say this is like a bright gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, really lovely. Yeah. But totally different color. And then, of course, the base grain is malt, 100% malt. This is not a blended whiskey, and that malt comes through.
It does.
Yeah. With unpeated whiskeys, you always get hints of that cereal oatmeal quality. Just with the lovely sweetness that this has, I get sort of like a smell of super sugar crisps and vanilla wafers in there. Some yellow delicious apple. It's got a really lovely complex nose. For some reason, I'm getting a little bit of baking spice and maybe sandalwood in the end.
Sandalwood.
But this is really delicious. So they call this the Middleton
Golden Honey,
Very Rare Vintage, and they make a special edition each year. Comes in this gorgeous wooden gift box. It's like a piece of furniture.
It's heaven. It really is. I want to tell you about another thing too. So when they closed down the distillery, they had some whiskey there, and they kept guards on it apparently, or it was guarded, and they've just started releasing it. And I don't know what it's called. It's like a secret blah 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 blah.
This is so good.
Point being that it goes for $40,000 a bottle. It is in a Waterford crystal bottle and the whole thing, but yeah, $40,000. It makes this little buddy a bargain.
Okay.
That was my contribution.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell them the prices so far of these things?
Sure. So this comes in at around 200. 200? Yeah, 200.
It's $200. The Barman Court 15-year-old spirit for $54.
And it is really good. I'm not a rum drinker, and I was actually able to taste that, which was kind of neat.
The next one is actually a good value. This is
it is.
So now we're getting into small batch bourbon and single malt Scotch. Oops, wrong side of the bottle. So we're leaving this bad boy for last. This is a cask strength killer Scotch. But the next one is the Knob Creek 12. Those are the super popular categories of whiskeys right now. Small batch bourbon, single malt Scotch. And because of that, we're seeing age statements going away. It's really sad. But yeah, Knob Creek is hanging on to this 12-year-old. And this was started off in 2019 as a special edition, and they've been able to work it into their it's supposed to be a regular stock item now. So we've been talking about small batch.
Yeah.
Where does this all come from? Well, the idea for small batch bourbon came from when a master distiller or owner of a bourbon distillery would go through the rick house, and every once in a while you come across a barrel, a cask that's just special, a honey barrel. It's amazing. It's really
Yeah.
alchemy because you take, 4 or 5 ingredients, certain kind of water, base grain,
Yeah.
all, but all the barrels are filled and made the same way. The only difference is like where they are in the rick house, but
Hmm.
there's got to be some other magic that happens because some barrels are just magic, and and the others are all consistently good. But
Yeah.
so there was a custom of taking these special barrels and saying, "Hey, I want this for myself, for me and my friends. Let's just bottle this separately, uncut, unfiltered. Just." And eventually, someone came along and said, "This is maybe commercially viable. Let's produce this." And I thought this is one of the Jim Beam brands. I thought Beam was the first small batch, but yeah, I just checked it out. And
Yeah.
actually, Colonel Blanton was the
Okay.
first one
Mm.
to do
His
small
own
batch.
small batch.
I think
Yeah.
it was Elmer Lee got him to put it out commercially, but originally it was his private stash.
Yeah.
So, but we're not talking about Blanton's. We're talking about the Beam products. So Jim Beam in the 1980s, they started the same thing. This is a family-owned, generation after generation distillery, starting with a German way back named Johann Beam, um, and in the 1980s, the current, was it Booker? No,
Yes, Booker. No.
yeah, okay, the great grandson of Jim Beam, um, had his Booker's bourbon, that he just made for family and friends,
Hmm.
and he decided to produce it commercially. So Booker's was the first Beam small batch bourbon. That was so much demand for it. It's made a certain way, certain style of bourbon. The thing with Beam is they have a little family of small batch bourbons, and the Booker's, the first one, I call it rocket fuel for the soul. It's always done at cask strength. It's about 6 years old. We're not pouring it now, but it's pretty amazing stuff. But they have 4 or 5. They have Booker's, Knob Creek, Basil Hayden, and Baker's.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think that's it. I might have missed one.
Okay.
Some of them are single barrel, some of them are small batch. So the loose definition for small batch in Kentucky in the bourbon business is less than 1,000 gallons, which is about 20 barrels of bourbon from a mash bill of about 200 bushels of grain.
Hmm.
I mean, these numbers are going to vary a lot. I'm sure, in some cases production is much bigger or maybe smaller. But the cool thing about Knob Creek is they do have that 12-year-old age statement, which you don't see on a lot of even higher end bourbons. And it's kind of interesting because Knob Creek has always had an age statement. Age statement is a little snobbish, but I'm kind of starting to miss them because an age statement on a bottle of whiskey means the youngest spirit in that whiskey has to be at least 12 years old.
Yeah.
The regular Knob Creek was always a 9-year-old, which is really good. They they lost the age statement for a while, and then they brought it back, and somehow in the process of keeping the Knob Creek 9 around, it allowed them to make Knob Creek 12 and to produce enough Knob Creek 12 to be able to put it out commercially. I'm really happy about that because age statements, unfortunately, are going by the wayside, and it is it is an indication of quality, and that no one's you can play fewer games with what's in the bottle.
Is that also the case with single malt?
Single malt
Age statements?
Yeah,
Gone
yeah.
by
I
the
mean,
wayside?
it's supply and
Yeah.
demand. It's just because the demand for these spirits, you can't just whip up a batch of 12-year-old whiskey when you run out. You got to wait 12 years.
Hmm.
And the same thing's happening with scotches. You're seeing all these no age statement scotches. Some of them are very good. Some of them I feel they're not as good as the age statement whiskeys that they're replacing. You see that in Scotch and in Japanese malts too, which are hugely
that's
popular.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So you think the age statement probably keeps them a little honest?
Yeah, but I can understand. There are very good ones. There are very good whiskeys without age statements.
Yeah.
And I can understand why the pressure is there.
I have a really stupid question. You know how in wine, certain wines, they can put a certain amount of whatever into the wine.
You mean a varietal?
Other varietals, but juice, if it's a weak weak year for the grapes in
Mhm.
some places. Is that ever the case with whiskeys, or with whiskeys, does it have to be actual? Like, bourbon, you have to have a certain amount of corn in it, and then it can be comprised of some other things, but basically it's controlled, or is it not?
Well, you're talking about the source of the grain?
No, I'm talking about what they put into it.
Yeah.
So,
No, I don't think there's any room there's no wiggle room
yeah,
there.
no wiggle room. Okay, that's what I was
Like
asking.
in California wines, I believe it's to have a varietal label on it, it's got to be 75%.
Yeah,
Which is fine because it allows for blending, which is typical for wine.
yeah,
But a single malt Scotch has got to be 100% malt whiskey. It's all malted barley,
okay.
and bourbon has to be a minimum of 51% corn.
Mm-hmm.
Then the rest is
Yeah.
the other allowed
Yeah.
grains.
Okay.
And then there are other rules about the way it's made. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
in blended whiskeys, that's where that's where you can add grain alcohol that's not
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the main grain. So
Good enough.
so yeah, you could. So there's wiggle room with what they call blended whiskeys.
Yeah.
And there are very good blended whiskeys.
Oh yeah.
And they're not so good blended
whiskeys. No,
whiskeys.
exactly. Okay, so
I'm always amazed by. Okay, we're talking about the cream of the crop here, but
yeah.
I'm amazed by so the rules for bourbon are very strict, and bourbon has to be aged in single use, first use, charred new American oak. Oak barrels are really expensive, and someone was just asking me the other day, how the heck does Evan Williams make a $14 bottle of bourbon? That follows those rules, and it's bottled as bourbon.
Yeah.
I mean, all I can think of is economy of scale. Maybe the production is so huge that they can put out something that inexpensively, but I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah.
Because a new oak barrel is, $1,000 or so, or close to it, and then after they use it once, it gets shipped over to Scotland for Scotch or used for planting flowers. But let's stop talking about this whiskey and taste it a little bit.
Okay.
So Knob Creek. Just a little curious note about the name.
Do you have a mash bill on it?
I don't think so. You know what? We don't have the mash bill. I tend to think it's a higher rye bourbon.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Because it's definitely not wheated. I don't think it's real high rye.
Yeah.
But it's not super sweet either.
Mm.
But here we have a nice sample of it. I love looking at the color of whiskey.
Pretty.
I think of it as there's a good reason for there's a reason they call it liquid gold. Okay, that's like a nice amber.
Yeah, it is.
Like a maple syrup color. I guess some hints of orange in it. That's really
definitely
lovely.
amber. I think you hit it with the amber.
This is bottled at 100 proof. So Knob Creek is named after the water source for this particular bourbon, which happens to be the creek that runs through Abraham Lincoln's ancestral farms. And so the name connection there is they wanted to make an honest bourbon. It's done at an honest proof. Personally, I don't trust 80 proof spirits generally. I like them a little higher, and I have a lot of respect for cask strength spirits because they're pure, they're uncut. You can always add your own water to it. You don't have someone else watering it.
Our bourbon was cask strength.
Yeah, 100 proof is is considered an honest proof. So that's the idea. Good value, honest proof bourbon. And actually, to put out this 12-year-old for $60, that's a really good deal. So, and if you've ever had regular Knob Creek or the 12 or the 15, they're very impressive drams.
There it is, chocolate bar.
Mm-hmm.
Chocolate
First
bar.
time she smelled it, she said chocolate bar, definitely like dark chocolate.
Yeah. You could tell I'm often on a diet, can't you? Chocolate.
Wow.
Baking spices, cinnamon.
Yeah, I mean, like with wine, spirits have to have a great aroma. This has a great aroma. And that's why you need one of these Glencairn glasses, a nice nosing glass.
Creaminess. That's so nice. Spice. It's really kind of glorious.
Wow.
I know. It's the flavor is phenomenal.
We are moving up a little bit in the proof scale.
Wow, yes, we are. You can taste that right away. There's a reason why they call it heat. So Rich is putting a little water into it. So I have to give you a little story about me when I started. I never drank whiskey until I met Rich. And so we would be tasting whiskeys at the store to bring something into our collection. And somebody would say, "Oh, Karen, do you want a little bit of water in there?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm tough." Because I thought, you were tough if you had it straight. And meanwhile, when you put a little amount of water in it, it helps you to drink it if it's really, really hot. But also, as we were saying before, it opens up this whole world of flavor, a whole bouquet, and a lushness of experience that isn't there before. So it's one of those cases where you think watering down is like, watering down. In this case, watering down a little bit just brings life to it. It's a wonderful kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a lot of complexity going on there. I get clove again, but I get a lot of vanilla, dark chocolate, of course, toffee, caramel.
Yeah, toffee, caramel. And there's a lot of clove. The clove is sort of at the bottom for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get that.
You have everything flowing above it, singing above it, and then
the spices kind of kick in at the end. All right, we didn't want this to go for so long, so let's
but
get.
It is anyway.
Yeah. Let's go on to the scotch. Wow.
Okay, the scotch is the last one. And then we have to eat dinner.
Yeah, we have to eat something.
While he's pouring the scotch, I'm going to go into our Wine and Spirits Club for just a minute. We have monthly Wine and Spirits Club. And if you were going to be getting your Bourbon Club this month, you would be getting a bottle of the Knob Creek right there. We write these great inserts for them. I usually write the inserts, but I don't do the spirits.
Yeah, I did them this month.
And
unfortunately, I left the mash bill
out. But I
out.
had to edit it anyway.
The only thing I could find on the mash bill I remember was it was like guess stat. They estimated, what was in it.
Not every distiller is forthcoming about their mash bill. They just like to keep it secret.
Proprietary trade secret. I can understand that.
Yeah, I have a recipe for Irish soda bread. That's my mother's. I rarely give it out to anybody. So there you go. Good stuff to keep a little secret.
Yep. So, so if you don't want to get Dad just one bottle and he loves scotch, you can give him the Scotch of the Month Club. Sign him up for 3 months, ongoing, and he gets one bottle a month with a little insert.
Yeah.
And he gets it delivered, or he can pick it up, or we have some limited shipping for spirits available.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, basically.
It's really fun. It's a great gift. No joke.
So now on to scotch. We were talking about age statements. This is from the Aberlour Distillery. Started in the 1830s, I want to say. 1825 it was first established in the town of Aberlour. Anyway, this is a non-age statement whiskey. They go by batches. This is batch 67. It's a wonderful whiskey, though. So, interesting story behind this one. So, the Aberlour Distillery, Highlands Distillery, started in the 1830s. I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole about it, but apparently, its main incarnation was under this guy James Fleming in the 1870s, and the distillery burned down in 1898. And then it was brought back, rebuilt, got through World War II, ended up with a large distillery group, the Campbell Distilleries in the 40s. Then Pernod Ricard picked it up in the 70s, and it became part of the Chivas Brothers division. And then apparently let me get the dates right, they were just installing a new still in 1975, and they discovered a time capsule with a bottle of Aberlour in it, wrapped up in newspaper from 1898.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that bottle is what they're trying to recreate with this Abunad, which they've been producing since then. Back then, they whiskey was made at an honest proof, and back then it was cast strength. They didn't water anything down. This was this is done at that proof. It's a funny story. Is around World War I, Some do-gooders decided people were drinking whiskey that's way too strong, so they got them to water it down to like 37%, which is less than 80 proof. And then they kind of grudgingly got it back up to 80, 40%, which is 80 proof, and that sort of became a standard minimum for spirits. But when Abinad came out first, originally it was cask strength, as most whiskeys were. This is done at 60%. Basically, it's a great Scotch. It's cask strength, and it spends all its life in first fill Oloroso sherry cask. Look at the color on that. It's sherry casks and Scotch just go together hand in hand. It's the the original barrel that they age Scotch in. There's a long story as to why Scotch whiskey is aged in barrels that were used for other things. It has to do with what's available, available in different types of barrels.
Was that it? Yeah.
Yeah, but the main things were originally it was mainly sherry barrels because sherry barrels were abundant, and then then bourbon barrels because they're only used once became standard for aging Scotches. But this is done in first fill Oloroso cask, Oloroso being one of the fullest body sherries, and it's done at cask strength. It's a real brawny bruiser, and it's got like a little bit of a cult following. And even though it doesn't have an age statement, we don't hold that against them. Wow. Okay. Big difference between Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey. When you are trying to get malt to ferment, you've got to sprout it.
Really beautiful.
And then you've got to dry it out again. Okay? So when you're malting barley, you've got to wet it down, let it sprout, and then dry it out again. And traditionally, that was done on peat fires, which lends the smokiness of Scotch. Now, this is not a very peaty Scotch because it's from the Highlands, but it's not a triple distilled, super smooth, easy Scotch whiskey like the Irish whiskeys are. Be careful, that's very strong. But anyway, the color on this is a super deep.
It's like honey.
Super deep color, like super deep bronze. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to tell. There's not a lot in there, but you don't want a lot in there. Trust me.
Yeah. I think mahogany comes to mind.
That's so good.
Wow. This has got
and
caramel,
I can
apricot roll-ups.
It's not overly peated because peat for me equals bad Girl Scout campfire, and I run away from it. That isn't.
This has the barely any
gorgeous.
peat. I get that lanolin wool scent.
Yeah.
That's typical in Scotch.
Yes. And also the flavor, butterscotch, honey.
Yeah.
Oh,
I get Ovaltine from it. It's,
Ovaltine?
Yeah, because of the malt.
Warm milk? So the first time, I'm going to do this really quickly. So if you're not used to drinking Scotch, let's say you're a wine person and you want to start drinking Scotch, this is how I started drinking Scotch. So Rich had a Scotch dinner, and of course I had to go to it. So we had a number. We had our little placemat with 5 little circles for the 5 different Scotches. So I decided the way I would decide which Scotch I liked was that I would pretend that I was on the moors, where I've never been. So who knows what the moors are like. They might be like a beach club. I would never know.
Not the Werewolf of London, are you?
No, not Werewolf of London. No, that would be funny. No, but I'm on the moors, and there's this big storm, and I'm walking on the moors, and I have my long skirt, and my scarves, and my this and my that. I'm getting there, and so I knock on a door to be let in, and they open the door, and the way I decide where I'm staying is by the Scotch. If they give me something to warm me up my cold bones, and it's like horrible, then I run out into the storm again until I find the one. Now, at that Scotch dinner, the one that I stayed for, I think it was the 18-year Macallan. The 12-year Macallan. You had a Macallan. Jovi, it was a Macallan. Jovi says it was a Macallan. Yeah, but my taste has grown a little bit since then, and I might stay for that one.
I think this one is wonderful.
It's glorious.
Okay.
Again, honey.
Oh, by the way, forgot the
Right.
most important part. The name Abunad means from the original. So
Oh,
it's a reference to this original bottle that they were trying to recreate, which I think is kind of cool. There's a few other distilleries that have tried to recreate old style scotches.
mm,
You see that once in a while. You know,
mm.
they use documents, they use distillery notes, they use you know sort of
Yeah,
like a little forensic thing, and they try to make the scotch the way it was.
I think it's great. Hey,
I
Rich,
love it. I love
good
it.
job. Good Scott.
This is my
Good
first time
whiskey.
tasting the Abunad, and it's definitely one of
Mine too,
my
and
go
it's
tos
really
now.
tight. Price point on that about.
110.
Okay, so that's
It's
really
not bad.
that's decent for that. It's really really nice.
So let's wrap this up.
Okay, let's
We've
wrap
gone
this up.
over half an hour.
Before we wrap this up, I want to apologize to both the Scots in the world and to the English. I love all of you. I love all countries. But I just had to make a few jokes. So thanks for watching this. If you watched it, and Rich, as always, is so very smart and knows so very much, and I'm so impressed by him. We're gonna go now. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
We'll be back
you.
next week with wine.
Bye.
That's more of our milieu.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got Wolfer wines coming up.
Yeah.
Great lineup of Wolfer wines.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night.